Again, from the Old History microphone, I'm Ray Mofield, and we're visiting today in the home of Gordon Chester. He's very familiar to you. Many of you perhaps had agriculture classes with him at Marshall County High School, and some of you listened to his radio program, Mr. Green Thumb. And it's a real pleasure, and thank you for letting me come.
Well, it's a pleasure to be on your program, Ray. I consider it a pleasure, and I guess a lot of people knows me here in the county from the program that didn't otherwise, but I've had students since 1952 when I first started teaching down at Sharp. So I guess there's a whole lot of people out there that know me that I probably wouldn't even know today.
I'm sure that's true. They have a little advantage of you. You were standing up in front of the class or in the public eye, and of course that happens to all of us who do radio programs particularly. Well, Gordon, were you born in Marshall County?
I was born close to the old home place, which is on Duncan Creek.
That's south side of the county, isn't it?
That's south side of the county. If you go through Brewers, it used to be an old road before the concrete road was made there that took off to the right there just as you went through Brewers. And it went down there and made a right-hand turn, and it went down to what is called Duncan Creek. It went all the way through to Kirksey.
Now, who was your father?
My father was Coy Chester.
And your mother, before she married?
She was a Marine. She was Bob Marine's daughter at Kirksey.
I started to say there are a lot of Marines around Kirksey. There used to be a man that seemed to me, was prominent in singing.
That was my Uncle George Marine.
Oh, yes, George Marine. I can remember that from a little boy when I was going to Hickory Grove, which is not all that far from Kirksey, I guess.
If you've ever heard Uncle George sing, he couldn't sing like Aunt Hattie, that's his wife.
Mm-hmm.
Aunt Hattie was a high alto, and if you could, if you was anywhere in the area, you could hear her singing.
Yeah, well, I really remember it with a great deal of pleasure, though I don't remember the exact details. That's been a while. After all, I'm 65, and so it goes back till I was starting school at Blakely. Did you ever hear of Blakely?
I've heard of it, but I'm not too familiar with it.
It is just north of Hickory Grove, between there and Wadesboro. About a mile from the Marshall-Callaway line, over in Callaway County. Well, do you remember either of your grandparents on either side?
Oh, yes. My grandfather's name was Oscar Monroe, or Bud Chester. He was the oldest of the Chesters that settled in this area. Of course, there was William Chester that came to this area from Virginia, came over the Blue Ridge Mountains, and they settled first at Soldier Creek and lived there for a while, and then they had to move from there because of what they call milk sick. And from what I see today as probably undulate fever that they had down there at that particular time. Then they moved back to where Carl Wade Chester lives right now, which is the old home place. I have a piece of paper here that shows where William A.'s wife was granted a $12 a month for him being in the war of it was 18 and 12.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. And of course,
there were a lot of Kentuckians in that particular war, and the first governor, Isaac Shelby, came back and was governor again and headed the militia, the troops that went up to fight at the Raisin River and many other places that were prominent battles in that conflict.
I used to have the deed, the old land grant deed to the farm. It got misplaced. Some of the house, Uncle Tommy's old house, I don't know whether you're ever familiar with it or not, but it's set on top of a hill just across from Duncan Creek.
Mm-hmm.
And you could just sit on his front porch and you could see his whole farm.
Now, you talk about roots. You've got roots in Marshall County and Kentucky and America, going back that far to the War of 1812. That's a long, long time. Something to be very proud of. Well, let's see. The Chesters, when they came from where? England, was it? Or?
Well, we don't know. We can't trace them to England. We can trace them to Virginia. And we've been having some work done on it, but I don't think we'll ever get very far because the records are very hard to get a hold of.
Mm-hmm.
And about all that we can get is what my Uncle Jimmy Chester that ran the store at Brewers tried to do a family tree back years ago, back in about 1920s.
Mm-hmm.
And we did have William Chester, which is my great-great-grandfather, did come over the Smoky Mountains, and he had, I believe it was 3 boys that came with him over the mountains and 2 daughters. And they settled first in what is now called Stewart County, Tennessee, and then they moved from Stewart County, Tennessee on to Soldier Creek, and then from Soldier Creek back to Duncan Creek.
Mm-hmm. Soldier Creek, I guess, was the first settlement in what is now Marshall. Really, almost the first settlement in the whole Jackson Purchase. Well, let's. You must have gone to a country school around there somewhere. Did you go to Brewers?
I went to Brewers, Brewers High School. Of course, back in those days, it was during the Depression, Ray, and there was a lot of moving around.
Mm-hmm.
I even went to school at Kirksey for a while when I was just a young boy.
Oh, yeah. My dad sharecropped around here and there, and I think I counted up once that we moved 12 times by the time I graduated at Hardin in 40.
I guess I was about 6 years old. I was going to school, to Ford School in Detroit, Michigan.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Of course, my dad moved to Michigan to find work.
Dad went up there and stayed 3 weeks, so I went to school 3 weeks in Detroit.
Well, we stayed until the Depression, until about 1930. Came back home in 1930 and settled on the old home place there of my grandfather's, which is just the other side of it's part of the old land grant farm there.
Mm-hmm.
Up from Uncle Tommy Chester's place that was originally well, it wasn't originally the old home place. The old home place was an old road that took off from where Uncle Tommy's house was, and it went west back towards Dunn's over there, you know.
Yes.
There used to be an old road through there, and according to my grandfather, I remember when I was just a young boy talking to him that the old home place was back down that lane.
Mr. Quentin Geyer lived in that general area, didn't he?
Yes, I was well acquainted with Mr. Guire. I had visited in his home a few times. He certainly lived to be a ripe old age, didn't he?
Well, he did. I believe he was 104. And he told me once, though, that he lived, although he lived his latter years in Murray, he lived 42 years at that farm place in Marshall County.
Down west of, back behind the Brewer store, Uncle Jimmy Chester's store back
yes,
there.
That's exactly where it was.
Yes.
So you went various places, but Brewers started at the first grade and ran through high school, didn't it?
Yes, it started through the first grade and went through high school. Some of the teachers that I had there might be interested in some of the teachers I did have.
Definitely.
I had Carl Johnson.
I had him as a principal at Hardin.
I had Hubert Hume. I don't know whether you ever remember Hubert Hume or not. Now, Hubert Hume married Uncle Tommy Chester's youngest daughter, and he taught school at Brewers as principal for a while.
Mm-hmm.
and I had, he was there while I was there. Also, I had Red Terry.
Oh, everybody remembers Red.
Yeah. And that's the main ones that I remember. Of course, the classes was quite small back then, and I could just about name all of them. James Treese and Keith Kress and Magdalene Stone and Nobel Treese and Reva Lyles and probably some more that I'm leaving out that I can't think of right there.
Well, you've done exceptionally well. That's tremendous. Did you try to work on the farm as you were growing up? And
yes, we had about 120 acres on my grandfather's farm. Of course, we came back there and we had to take care of him because he was getting so old and feeble. And
what kind of crops did you grow?
oh, tobacco. I never got so sick of tobacco in all my life. My brother went off to Chillicothe, Missouri, to a business college about the time that I was, I guess around 16 years old, and I had 6 acres of dark-fired tobacco that were.
Back then, you had to suck it and worm it, didn't you?
Yeah, you start on you would start on a Monday morning, and you'd wind up on a Saturday, and then you'd start back again and get the next Monday morning.
Right.
It'd take you a week to get over it. And my dad had heart trouble too, and I had to take the crew for him. So I've been in the top of the barn, the bottom of the barn, just anywhere you want to say I've been.
You've been to the collar beam.
Yes.
Okay. I started to say we were glad to see Sunday come and go to church. Then it's about the only day you had that you could rest much.
Now there we had something that a lot of people are probably not very well familiar with. There's a few of them around, but my dad was a sweet potato farmer.
I remember that we grew, a row in the garden, but we never grew any to sell or commercially.
We shipped them all over the whole South. We had beds that we dug in the ground that would be trenches. We'd go out and cut a good oak tree and drive the boards out, and put the boards over those flues, and we'd have a firebox at one end, and those beds would be something like 30 or 40 feet long and about 12 feet wide.
Now you produced your slips there.
And produced the Nancy Hall and the Puerto Ricans. That's all they grew back then.
Yeah, I remember we'd had both. I liked those Puerto Ricans. They were a little redder.
They're redder. To me, they were a better baking potato than the Nancy Hall. They a little sweeter, and you put them on the hearth and put some coals on the bottom and some on the top, and put a little butter on them, and you had something good to eat.
You're making me hungry. I used to go to my great-grandfather Hal Edwards' place, and my grandmother, who was Ely Cope Edwards, would do exactly that. Boy, I can almost taste it now. And I'm really interested to hear that. I wasn't aware that anybody around actually grew them commercially.
Well, we had a big potato house. Well, we say a big potato house. We could store something like 400 or 500 bushels of potatoes in it every winter.
That would be big to me.
And
we just, as I said, grew one row in the garden.
The walls were built out of oak lumber, and they was at least 6 foot thick through, and it was filled with sawdust all the way down the sides. The top was filled with sawdust. The door was filled with sawdust.
That kept it warm in the winter.
Warm in the winter.
And really cool in the summer, didn't it?
Yes. And so we would grow something like 6 acres of sweet potatoes each year. And of course the strings is what we would bed, and we'd take the others to Tater Day. But we never did sell very many of them because, I don't know, there was lots of sweet potatoes back then. Everybody grew them.
But you did have some that you shipped away from here.
The slips.
Uh-huh.
We'd take them to Kirksey, we'd box them up, we'd pull them by the hundreds, and I think we got $1.50 a hundred for them back then. And we put rubber bands around them and wet them with paper, with newspaper, and wet them and put them in boxes. And we shipped mainly out of the old post office at Kirksey, where we shipped.
Well, that was a good operation. You didn't have much competition in this area, did you?
Oh, there was a Cunningham man at Kirksey that was in the business too.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, back then, Puryear was a potato
Capital,
Capital.
so to speak. Uh-huh.
Of the state, but
They
they
had
didn't do.
potatoes and bricks. I remember
Yes.
that brick kiln there for.
Well, did you know there's brick kilns right out in front of our house at our old home place? There was 2 brick kilns back there.
Right here in Marshall County?
Right here in Marshall County. A lot of people don't know that, but
Well, I'm glad you brought that up. I didn't remember it. I never knew it, probably.
you can go back and you can find the evidence of the brick where it was manufactured there, but you can't see anything that looks like a kiln or anything because it has been such a long time ago. But there were 2 kilns there that was west of my grandfather's farm, about, I'd say a quarter of a mile, a half a mile west of it, towards Rufus Ray's back on the, Rufus Ray lived way back on the river back there on Clark's River. But it's kind of what we call no man's land back then. Nobody lived back there.
You know, there were a lot of brick buildings in Wadesboro, evidently, because when we lived there in the 1926, I can remember that you could wander around the fields, and every field was just full of brick. You could see bluegrass, too, from the lawns that had been there in the town of Wadesboro. And, of course, all that was gone there. There was only one brick house in Wadesboro that I can remember, and I've told it belonged to Congressman John L. Murray. The Trimbles lived in it when I was growing up.
I remember some of the Trimbles. I had some about my age that was in the school, and they were from Wadesboro, best I recall.
Yes. And, of course, the later generation, the ones in my class and so on, were Gerald Trimble, Tom Trimble, who played basketball and achieved some note.
Tom was about my age.
Yeah. Okay, well, we've gotten you up that far. Now, did you, your brother went away to college. When did you decide to go?
Well, as soon as he got out of college, my father went up and saw London Division and wanted to know if he'd get a note for me to go to college. Of course, my brother went to Chillicothe, Missouri. Of course, that was a famous college back then, and that day it was a pretty good-sized college out there in Missouri. It's almost, Chillicothe is almost in Kansas.
Yes, sir.
And he went up there, and when he graduated and got through, my dad said, well, you need to go to school too. So Bowman was good enough to let us have a little money, so I went to Chillicothe, Missouri for about a year or year and a half, and took, of all things, pen art, which you don't ever hear of being taught in school today. But we had a Mr. Zimmerman, which was the world's second best penman at that time, that taught pen art. You can shade those letters, you know, and you've seen these documents where they have, we make our own ink, we had these real sharp pointed pens with a quill on it. And
that's fancy writing.
Real fancy writing. I got a little bit proficient in it, but not like I would like to have. Of course, we took bookkeeping also, and the point back then was that in those ledgers that they used in bookkeeping, that you had to have very distinct writing, and you had to be able to make figures that was very small.
Mm-hmm.
You had small areas to put them in,
Yes.
and they really stressed that.
Well, now, eventually, you got an agriculture degree. Or did you go
Yes,
to Murray, UK, Lexington?
I've been to Murray and UK both. Of course, that was after I left Chillicothe, Missouri. I went to Detroit, where my brother was, and I hadn't been up there but just a short time. And in 1952, I believe it was, I was inducted in the Armed Services.
Now, where did you train?
I trained at Fort Sill, Oklahoma.
And then were you sent?
I was sent from there to Fort Meade, Maryland, and then from there I was sent to England, and I was what you would call a replacement field artilleryman.
Mm-hmm.
And otherwise, all these different divisions that they had fighting the Germans all had their own artillery, but we was reserve artillery. So they'd give them a rest and put us on the front line.
Mm-hmm.
I have been attached with the 101st Airborne, with the 82nd Infantry, 102nd Infantry, 3rd Armored,
Mm-hmm.
and each one of those. In fact, we crossed the Rhine with the 101st Airborne Division.
Yeah. Now, were you married when you went in service?
No, sir, I wasn't.
Where'd you meet this lady here?
Well, it so happened that she was going to school at Kirksey, and my mother was a cook at Kirksey.
Mm-hmm.
And I wrote her a letter one time. I says, I want you to get some good girl's name for me to write. So she sent me her name, and that's the way we got acquainted.
Oh, that's great. Your mother was impressed then, or she was sent. That's beautiful.
Thing about it was, I was thinking I was going to be writing to her sister who was a little older than her, but it turned out that she got the letter from her sister and started writing me, and it turned out
Oh, that's fine. Now, what was her name?
well, her sister's name was Frances, and of course hers is Annie. And Elizabeth.
And their last name
was Suter.
Suter. Uh-huh.
Now, he's the man that made molasses between Kirksey and Stella. If you've ever been down that road when that old molasses mill was running there.
I well remember that. And that was her father.
That was her father.
Well, that's good. There were some Suters in Murray State when I was going. So a rather common name in that part of Callaway County. All right, so you met her, and then what year did you get married?
Well, that was about...
the war was over, I guess, 1946.
Yeah, I came back December the 25th at Newport News, Virginia, in about 1900 and, I was over there nearly 4 years. I went in 42, so I've been about 46 that I got back.
Do you have any children?
Yes, we have 2 children. I have a son that is a computer technician. He doesn't work for General Tire, but they lease the computer to operate General Tire, and he works for MeasureX out of California.
And they do work for them?
And they, yes.
Do you have any grandchildren?
Yes, we have 2 grandchildren. My son has got twin boys.
Mm-hmm.
And
you got a total of 4 altogether.
4 altogether, and then my daughter's got 2 daughters. She's in Houston, Texas. She's a registered nurse in Houston, Texas.
Mm-hmm. Well, you've done very well then in this letter writing that you started out there.
Well, it seems like it.
Oh, that's fine. Now, we only have about 5 more minutes left, but I want to certainly get in anything you particularly want to put on, but among others, I'd like to focus something on your career. You taught high school agriculture quite a while, did you not?
Yes, in fact, I taught it for 30 years, I guess. Well, I was counting my Army time there. But I started in Sharp in 1952. And by the way, Ray, I think I'm the first one that ever taught any typing in Marshall County. Somebody said there might have been some typing down at Sharp.
Mm-hmm.
I mean at Calvert City. But in 1952 and 53, I can remember the members of my class, we taught typing up on the stage in the dressing room, on the stage of Sharp School. And
took advantage of every possible space.
Yes, because I went in the Army with a 50 words per minute typist when I went in the Army.
And that always helped you, didn't
I
it?
talked Holland Rose into letting me rent some typewriters and to teach those kids how to type, because that was something other that wasn't being taught in schools at that particular time.
Yeah. Well, that certainly was great. I'm all in favor of it. Let's see. Now, did you not maybe pioneer the high school greenhouse?
I did. I pioneered the high school greenhouse. Of course, about that time, greenhouses was becoming important in agriculture as a side trade for boys on the farm. And I used to go to Dixon Springs, Illinois, up to SIU, to their meetings up there, and I saw some greenhouses up there I liked. And one especially I liked was from Lima, Ohio, which was not too far away. And I think we built that greenhouse over here at Marshall County. That was the first building that was ever built on the school grounds at Marshall County High. In fact, we spent one whole full year coming from North Marshall in a bus up there to use the greenhouse there when it was first built. And of course, I'll have to not take all of the credit for the greenhouse, because my good friend Ben Frazier, which is a very good contractor, stepped in and with his crew and helped put it up. But my ag boys did do a whole lot. We put all of the watering in, we put the drainage system in, we put the sprinkler systems in, and the heat system in, and the ventilating pad in the back. And it was pretty modern greenhouse back then. It was very modern.
I know it used to cause a bit of excitement when at various kinds of meetings. I know that the Historical Society, for one, you would offer to sell those little plants for $1 a piece, and I think they just snapped them up, of course.
Oh, yes.
You were able to raise some funds to go in your school projects, I guess, that way.
Yes, I have experimented in the greenhouse. Of course, I was interested in it myself from the standpoint of what I could do with it. I had one crop of tomatoes in there, Ray, that we started in, I believe it was in November, and we had ripe tomatoes through to about the middle of February.
Oh, that's something.
And that was in the half of the greenhouse. And they were big ones, and they were really good ones, too. They tasted just like they came out of the garden. So we did that one year, and then one year I went with some other types of flowers that we had never grown before, so like your Gessner reds, your Calmnias, and I went into the process of reproduction of plants through rooting a whole lot, and hybridization and things like that in the greenhouse. I wanted to put as much science into it as I possibly could, besides just simply growing plants.
Surely. Well, we have 1 minute left. Do you have any special story you'd like to relate before we go off?
Well, I don't know, but I guess the most famous plant that was ever grown in Marshall County Schoolhouse was called a roadrunner.
A roadrunner?
Yes, we call it the roadrunner. I can't pronounce the name of it. I'd be ashamed to try it. The Stitzler, I think it is. But it looks like the roadrunner out west.
Yes.
And it took it 5 years to bloom after we had it in there, and the art department, Mrs. Ford, class simply went wild over that particular plant. Everybody in the class wanted to draw and wanted to paint that one particular
Well, isn't that something?
flower.
I never heard that story before. Probably many of our listeners have not. Well, thank you very much. Do you want to say a word?
Well, I'd just like to say I've enjoyed it, Ray. I've found out some things I didn't know, although I've